Hi and welcome to TICKER Climate. My name is Holly Stearns. It's great to have you tuning in. On TICKER Climate, we tackle the climate crisis facing our planet and we examine what actions governments as well as corporations need to be taking. Each week we speak with key movers and shakers in this space. Now, my co-host Scott Hamilton is a climate change and energy expert. Scott is an author, researcher and policy advisor with a mission to tackle the big issues and accelerate climate change action. Scott, great to have you as always.
Hello, Holly. How are you today?
Really good, Scott. Now, exciting program today. Our guest is Jane Caro. Jane is a Walkley Award winner, novelist, author, commentator, and also advertising writer, a climate campaigner, and one that we are thrilled to have on TICKER Climate today. Jane, welcome. Great to have your company.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So great to speak with
Hi.
you.
Hi, Jane. Great to have you on TICKER Climate.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So just kicking off, Jane. Last week we had the school strike for climate, which has now been around since 2018, when Greta Thunberg sort of started it off with her protest outside Parliament in Sweden. What is your take on this activism by the students, and why are they so angry, do you think?
Because it's their future that we're playing fast and loose with. It makes perfect sense to me that they would be furious at older people in society who, after all, have the levers of power in their hands, particularly those who have the levers of power in their hands, and who just seem to be not interested, don't care. I mean, I was actually speaking to an older gentleman the other day. I was in a hospital as you are at my age, there's all these health things that go wrong, and he was in the mood for a chat, and he said, he believed in climate change, but it'd see him out, he wouldn't experience it. And I said, don't you have children, grandchildren? And he said, yeah, I suppose it might have an effect on them, but he seemed to be very blithely consigning them to a much worse future outlook than he has enjoyed. And I find that quite a shocking attitude, and it makes me just as angry as it makes the students. And when I can, I join the student strike, looking ridiculous, no doubt, being, decades older than most of them. But that doesn't matter. I mean, the more people that go, I took to the, I think it was the 2019 student strike, I took my 88-year-old mother, and what was lovely was so many young people coming up to her the whole time saying thank you so much for being here, because one of my great sorrows, I think, is that I feel I won't leave the world to my grandchildren in as good a state as my grandparents left it to me, and that's a failing by my generation.
Jane, I saw that you recently said it's no wonder many women are actually rethinking having babies. Just on this topic, exactly what you're speaking about. Can you just explain what exactly you mean by that? I mean, where is Australia going wrong, and the rest of the world for that matter?
Well, in a number of areas we're going badly wrong. We make it incredibly expensive for people to have children. We expect women to bear the brunt of those costs in terms of lifetime career opportunities lost, lifetime earnings lost, lifetime ability to build up super lost. We really haven't moved in terms of the way we regard child rearing from probably the way it was regarded 100 years ago. And but we've moved all the supports and benefits and changed all of that, probably rightly, so women have gotten caught between, a rock and a hard place when it comes to what it's going to cost them, not just physically, emotionally, mentally, intellectually, all those other things, that the enormous change that gestating and bearing and then feeding and rearing a child brings, but just in sheer economic sense, the motherhood penalty is real and very large, and the fatherhood benefit is real and very large. So, if we want women to have more children, I'm not sure that we do, but if we do, then we need to look at what kind of a price we ask them to pay for doing so. But there's another reason too, and I very rarely come across a young a woman who is pregnant or thinking of getting pregnant who doesn't talk to me about should she do it? Is it responsible to bring a child into a rapidly deteriorating climate, particularly perhaps in Australia where we don't have the same level of hope, I think, because those in power, particularly at the moment, don't seem to care and don't seem to be doing what could be done to make us feel that at least we're moving in the right direction. There's a sort of deadening of hope by this terrible inertia that Australia seems to have locked itself in, frankly, ever since Tony Abbott. And we just don't seem to be able to get out of it. And I think that really does affect the way a lot of thoughtful young people approach the idea of do they want to have children or not.
Certainly is, Jane, and we sort of hear the slogan, technology, not taxes, but the federal government goes and spends $600 million on a new fossil gas plant, $200 million on the Bootaloo Basin in the Northern Territory. So there's billions of dollars of our taxpayers they're still spending. So it's really a bit of a sham.
Well, you said it all. You said it's a slogan.
It is.
Slogans are worse than useless. Like, forget the slogans, right? That's the first thing we need to jettison. We need to start having serious and intelligent conversations about the really difficult and wicked problems facing us and the real, really appalling future. I mean, for goodness sake, we've just been through the most incredible 18 months. World record-beating drought, unbelievable fires, like just beyond comprehension, really, the level of intensity of some of those fires. Then floods, then a pandemic, for goodness sake, and then a mouse plague across half of New South Wales. I think it's positively biblical, and yet, business as usual as far as the old blokes that run the country are concerned. I'm as angry as the students. I just think it's quite extraordinary, frankly. And to talk about a gas-led recovery, to talk about old coal will be part of the mix for the foreseeable future, all this sort of nonsense. Well, I've become more and more cynical about it. It seems we have an oligarchy, not a democracy anymore, and rule for the billionaires and for those who give big enough donations to political parties. And the rest of us can go hang, it seems. It's quite terrifying.
What sort of action would you like to see from Australian government, for example? What sort of action would you like to see them making rather than, putting forward these fossil fuel plants and everything like that? What sort of action do you want to see?
Well, I think there's plenty of plans out there about how we could start to really ramp up the renewable energy sector, in which we have a natural advantage. We've got more wind and sun and wave power and, all those things than most other countries. We've got enough room to put those things around without really impacting on highly populated areas. There's so many things we could be ramping up, and yet we seem to be resisting and dragging our feet. In fact, the general public that have made the change in terms of solar energy by just bypassing the government and stick it on their rooftops. It's like we just need the government to get out of the way. If they're not going to do anything, just get out of the way and let everybody else do it. Like business is ready to do it. It feels like everyone's just hanging there on the starting line, ready to charge. Electric vehicles are on their way in a big way. And if we don't take that by the horns, we're literally going to end up the world's dumping ground for all the obsolete petrol and diesel vehicles and trucks in the world. We're going to end up being like India and Russia looked in the 1960s with, just hideously crappy cars on the road because we're the only stupid who's still buying them. They could do so much. Jane. It's so frustrating that we could do it. And we just need, with, the much vaunted coal mining jobs, which are rapidly disappearing anyway because of automisation. But nevertheless, the delicate coal miners whose jobs must be protected. We don't care about tourism workers or hospitality workers or aged care workers or childcare workers or all those other people in the arts and the university sector. They've been losing their jobs hand over fist thanks to COVID. Do we care about them? Oh, no. It's only coal miners. They're the only jobs that matter. We could help coal miners transition into renewable energy jobs. The point is, this I learned a long time ago from advertising, is people have never been in the coal business. They've always been in the energy business. Just like I used to say to booksellers, you're not in the book business. You never have been. You're in the information, entertainment, escape business. You're always in the business of the benefit that you provide. Kodak practically disappeared because it thought it was in the film business, not the memory business. So Australia is stuck in this very literal interpretation of what kind of businesses we're all in. People, if they felt they were in the energy sector, the energy business, not the coal sector and the coal or the mining sector, then I think we'd have an easier way of helping them to move into the hugely growing jobs that will happen in the energy sector as it changes and adapts to a new world. Otherwise,
Sure is, Jane. Sure is, Jane. And it's also an example of the priorities of the federal government, that they spend $600 billion on a fossil gas plant, but nothing for a dedicated quarantine facility. And here in Melbourne, we're in lockdown, which is the reason I'm not in the studio today. But there was no money for something we desperately need, and we don't need another fossil gas plant.
Absolutely.
Well, one of the problems that we run on this idea of scarcity. Governments love to tell the public that there's nothing there, there's not enough money, and that you're all fighting each other for these dollars. It's absolute rubbish. We're living in one of the most prosperous countries, in one of the most prosperous periods in human history. That there isn't this scarcity idea. I mean, we've decided to, if you like, falsely create scarcity by being terrified of ever raising any tax ever. Goodness only knows why. When you've got billionaires, there's a really good reason to raise taxes on some people. No one needs that much money. But we've decided that we're going to push scarcity, which makes people compete with one another and be jealous and worried and frightened and anxious. Works for governments really well. Great control mechanism. But actually, we have enough money to fund the things we need to fund. It's just a matter of prioritising what we fund and what we don't fund. And this government loves to give money to people who already have money. They see it as an incentive when it's given to the rich, but they hate giving any money at all to people who don't have any. For some reason, give $1 to a rich man and it'll incentivise him to make another $1. But if you give $1 to a poor man, it'll mean, he'll just sit back and do nothing. It's absolutely nonsensical.
Jane, yes, definitely. I could keep speaking with you about this, but we do have to wrap things up, unfortunately. Lastly, before we go, though, in a couple of sentences, I mean, there's a lot going on at the moment in the world, a lot of doomsday talk and all of that. But what personally keeps you going? What else? What other option is there? I mean, you just keep fighting, don't you? We all have to. I've got grandchildren. I have to do everything I can to make up for the fact that I haven't left, I won't be leaving them a world in as good a state as my grandparents left me. But I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that they have the opportunity to actually leave a better world to their grandchildren than I left to them. So you just go on. I mean, and it's not about winning or losing or any of that. You just fight. Joshua Wang from Hong Kong said it brilliantly. It's kind of sad, but I find it inspirational. He said, he came out, Alan, they said to him, why are you fighting China? You can't possibly win. And he said, because he was going straight back to the demonstrations, and he said, we fight on with no hope of winning. Now, I'm not saying we have no hope of winning, but even if we don't have any hope of winning, we fight on. Yeah, absolutely, Jane. Some great advice there. Unfortunately, that is all we have time for today on Ticker Climate. Jane and Scott, thank you so much for both of you for your time and insight.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.